808's. One of the most iconic sounds in music of the past, but especially in music today. Now I want to show you some tips and tricks that you can use to make your own crazy, dope 808's, and nobody else is going to have them unless you want them to. How about we just start off by building a nice foundation and then we'll get down to the processing a little bit later. Now today I'm going to use Serum because I love Serum and I'm comfortable in it, but you can kind of use whatever synth works for you. We're just going to be making some basic sounds here. I like to take care of a couple of things right off the bat just to make life a little bit easier for us. So I'm going to lower the octave of C3 by 1 just so that I can press in the middle of the keyboard and still have it play a lower note. The other thing I'm going to do is fix the velocity to be at its maximum value here, which is 127. So that every time I press a key, it will be consistent inside of the synth and there won't be any changes that are caused by velocity differences. So starting off, I'm going to make this a monophonic synth because I only ever really want one voice to be played at the exact same time since it's an 808. We're not playing 808 chords. And for oscillator A, I'm going to change this to be a sine wave. Let's just use this analog sine wave here, perfectly legit. The first thing I'm going to do is lower this random phase down to 0 because I want it to start at the same point in the waveform every single time to, again, make it more consistent. Next thing I like to do is head down to our envelope here and start shaping it to get it sounding more like an 808 right away. So I'm going to slow down this attack just a little bit so that we can get rid of some of the clicks. We're going to lower the sustain down to -infinity. And then we'll do the decay at about half a second roughly. It doesn't have to be perfect. Somewhere around there maybe. And as an option, you can increase the time of the release to match your decay so that no matter how you press the note, it's still going to sound the same, which I kind of like. Next thing I'm going to do is come up to the menu here and I'm going to copy the settings from oscillator A over to oscillator B. This time though, I'm going to lower the octave down by 2 and I'm going to apply some frequency modulation from oscillator B onto oscillator A. And the way we do that is from this warp menu here. We go down and we select FM from B. And watch what happens when we increase this. I love me some frequency modulation. Next thing we're going to do is beef up the sound a little bit by adding this sub oscillator here. And I'm going to lower the octave down a couple. Turn it up to 100% so we can get lots of that sub harmonic there. One thing that you'll notice about modern 808 sounds is that they have an envelope applied to the master tuning of the whole sound. So it'll kind of be like, it'll go sharp and then it'll sort of rest down at its fundamental frequency. In order for us to do something similar to that, let's head up to the Matrix tab and we can start to affect the master tuning. So if you set the source to be envelope 2, which we'll use as our envelope to affect the master tuning, and then set the target here in this column, you go to global and then master tune. Now we have envelope 2 affecting our tuning here. Now it's not doing anything at the moment because we need to increase this amount here. So when I do that, to change the behavior of the tuning here, we're going to edit envelope 2. And I'm going to start by bringing the sustain all the way down to 0 because I want it to rest at where the fundamental key is that we're playing. And we're going to slowly attack down just a little bit. And then we'll set the decay to be something much shorter than it is. Obviously we can hear that it's a little bit too high at the moment, so we're just going to bring the amount down. Okay, so this is our basic foundation here that we're going to build it from. So now what I like to do is press Command T and then set the input of our new track to be resampling. And I'm going to call this 808.1. There's our sound right there. So here's where we just start reshaping how it sounds from the audio alone. The first thing I'm going to do is add a little bit more compression because I'm treating this almost like a separate sound now. You know, my next favorite thing in the whole world is some saturation. So we're going to add some saturation. Just the idea is that we're increasing the amount of harmonics that are present inside of our 808 because the more harmonics there are in that lower range, the thicker and doper it's going to sound. So we'll start with analog clip is fine. And I'm going to turn down the output because I'm turning up the drive for sure. You can already hear it's really starting to come along. And next up, I'm going to add an EQ and I'm going to bump up just around like somewhere around 300 hertz, 200 to 300 hertz. I really like how it sounds when there's a little bit more happening in that little range. All right, and then we're going to go even crazier with the compression, add a little bit of parallel processing here. So we get some serious gain reduction. And then I'm gonna bring the dry wet down to about 50%. And actually, so I don't have to keep starting and stopping this audio, I'm gonna make a little pattern here. Don't need anything more complicated than that. What I like to do at this stage is do a little bit of parallel processing in terms of the frequency spectrum. So I like to split the signal into its lower harmonics versus its higher harmonics and then sort of process them a little bit differently. So if I open up an audio effect rack, what I can do is hit this little button here with the like hamburger looking thing. And then I press create chain. I'm gonna call this highs. And we're gonna add an EQ here. Let's call it at about, I don't know, 200 Hertz. Then what I'm going to do is highlight the chain that we just made, and I'm press Command D, and I'm going to call this lows. You can see that we've got the same EQ from our highs, but this time I'm just going to change the type of filter that it is from a high pass to a low pass. So it splits them at the exact same spot. Now for the highs, what I like to do is add a little bit of chorus, a little bit of information in the stereo image. Now let me just isolate it so you can hear it better. Now for the lows, I like to add in just a little bit more saturation, but of a different type this time. So we're not going to use analog clip. I like to use this cyanoid fold. I'm going to bring the output down, of course, and then we'll bring the drive up and you can hear what this starts to do. Now we're going to resample this sound again, but before we do that, there's one other trick that I want to show you, and that's to duplicate this audio from your normal 808. And I'm going to press Shift Tab to bring up this menu here. I'm going to take off warp so that when I increase the pitch by 12 in this case, it shortens the audio, which is what we want. It sounds like this. And we're going to use this sound to make that sort of batterhead sound for our 808 so we can increase the punch of it a little bit more. What I'm going to do though is shorten the waveform a little bit here and then just fade it out so it's super transient focused, right? So now what I'm going to do is highlight all of our processing here, and I'm going to press Command X, and we're going to cut it so that we can press Command G and put our audio track into a group here. And then on top of the group, I'm going to paste our processing. So that way, when I add another audio track here, and then make sure that both of these pieces of audio are playing at the same time, we get kind of our kick sound. We'll call that kick, and this will be our 808. Now we get to choose how we want to balance how punchy the very transient of the 808 is. So we might go with something like that. I'm going to create another new audio track called this 808.2, and just like we did before, I'm going to set the input to be resampling, arm it so that we can actually record something, and solo the group. And there is our 808. And now here's the really fun part where we can press Command-Shift-T, open up a new MIDI track, and then drag our new 808, what did I say? Drag our 808 into a sampler. And if I right click here and I press normalize volumes, now we get a big fat 808 sound, which is what we were after. And keep shaping the sound how you want it to be. Even though we've already added sort of compression and saturation, you might want a little bit more. You might want an EQ on there and just boosting some of this stuff here. Okay, maybe a little bit more saturation. There are no rules. Now this is what I would call maybe a short 808. Now my homework assignment for you is to take these concepts and make one that's a little bit longer. And as always, this is a great point to start, adding different things that gives it your own unique flavor. Save the preset, of course, if you want, so you can build from it later on. But also, one other thing that I would recommend that you do is put a tuner of some kind at the end of this sample here, so that when I play C, it shows up as basically a C. You can see right here. Now, if I were bouncing this out, I would bounce it out as a waveform that has the correct note at the end of it so that you can pick the right 808 for whatever beat it is that you're working on. And make some 808s that are in different keys as well, like that'll be important. Sometimes the 808s that are at C don't sound that good when you are working in G, for example. So go make some crazy dope 808 sounds that only you have, like I said, which makes your beats all the more unique and personal, right? And let me know how it goes. We'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.